And hey, everybody, and welcome to the Finding Magic podcast, where we talk about structured intuition, creativity, and magic, as discussed in my book, Getting Into the Flow. And we learn from our guest stories, and it helps us broaden our view of reality and understand how magic is created and sensed so that we can come to realize our true potential to live our lives as purposeful and powerful and from an inspired and joyful place. I'm Vincent, your host. Let's get into it. So welcome to this episode I.5. And today I'll be interviewing Tess Miller-Sharp and inviting her to share a story of magic showing up in her life. Now, Tess is a passionate teacher and mentor, specializing in structured intuition and a transformative quantum kinesiology technique known as life alignment. Her innovative approach is revolutionizing success for change makers, empowering them with the tools and techniques that create significant impacts in their professional and personal lives. Tess's dedication to teaching and her mastery of quantum energy are reshaping the way we harness intuitive power for achieving our goals. So Tess is going to tell us today about the time when she was looking for a new family home. So Tess, perhaps you can tell me a little bit about your story, starting with the background. Where were you at the beginning?
So we were living in this beautiful home that we were hoping to buy, but unfortunately, sort of the longer you live there, the more the property prices end up going up. So we knew we were out of the market for it, but we were really comfortable there long term. And then we got given notice. Luckily, we were given 3 months notice to find somewhere. So we felt that best thing to do was have a tune in and have a look, considering also other, statistics that were around. So possibilities of getting a rental or, if we did want to buy. So we did our research first and then we did a tune in.
Yeah. And what came out of the tune in?
Well, interesting. We actually got to rent. So we set about having a look around, had a look in the newspapers, found this home for rent by a private landlord, and it wasn't far from where we were. So we thought, well, that'll be great. Let's just move forward with that. It was a little bit smaller than what we wanted. So I had to get a little studio, like a portable studio, onto the property as well. So we made big progress in getting onto this rental place.
But there's more to it, isn't there? What comes next?
So I actually went overseas, and when I came back, my husband picked me up from the airport and said, we've got a house that we're going to look at. I looked at it yesterday and I think it's ours. And of course, I was totally blown because I thought we were renting, and now all of a sudden we're looking at buying. So we looked at the house, and the very next day we put an offer in, which was a little bit tricky for the person that we were going to rent from. But when magic comes your way, we have to be careful that, we follow the magic as well, that sometimes checking in again and again is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for the listeners, Jay's your husband. What led him to start looking at a property to buy?
For him, I think it was security. Really, it was about not being moved on again. It was about having a place that he had always wanted, living in an area that, we had always wanted to buy a home in. So for him, I think he had this underlying energy attraction to that, even though initially we got that it was correct to actually rent.
Yeah, and this is a way that intuition often happens, that you tune in, you get some kind of information, but there's something else that's going on over the top that comes in and says, no, that's not quite the whole story.
Yeah, and looking back at it in hindsight, it's almost as if we needed that sense of security before I went overseas for work. There was something about being prepared, and it somehow relaxed our nervous system that we sort of, knew what was going to happen. But of course, when I came back, everything changed, and it was quite miraculous the way that it changed, actually.
Right. So you put an offer in. What happened from there?
We had to wait a day or two to hear back on the offer, but we also had to we were delayed. We were actually delayed in signing the rental agreement as well. So not only were things, it's like what we thought was going to happen had slowed down almost to a halt, so that we could go in this other direction. And what was the most magical thing about it is when we did a tune in about what we would love, we actually got two different visions. Now, one of those visions was a 3-story house with a pool, with an ocean view on a hill, and it was in the area that we were in. Now, that was very strong for both of us, although I got the area was in a particular street down the road. So, of course, thinking that we were going to move into a rental because our time was up where we were, then we realized that we had nowhere to go. And what ended up transpiring is that we ended up renting for almost a month because we were in that in-between place of leaving where we were before we moved into the house that we were going to buy. And so, interesting enough, we still ended up renting, just not for as long as we thought. But the house that we rented was in the street. I'm getting goosebumps. Was in the street, and it was in exactly the same location as what I had seen in my vision. But there was no pool, and it wasn't 3 stories. So it's interesting how intuition can show us. We think there's just going to be one thing, that's it, and that's going to be the end result, whatever you get in that circle, that information. But when we're working synergistically, we've got those 2 circles, 2 lots of information, blending for a step-by-step outcome as opposed to a one-step outcome as the final result. So that's what I learned out of that. And that was totally mind-blowing, that our intuition can guide us in the most meaningful way that's completely irrational.
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight, Tess. Thanks for sharing that. Now, there's something that I remember from that time. And you were talking a lot about holding the tension, holding the tension, holding the tension. Do you remember what that was about? There was some uncertainty about one aspect of it. You weren't sure if you were going to get you weren't sure that it was almost as if you had a choice of 2 places and you weren't sure the place you had settled on was really the right place for you.
Well, that's it, because we were grappling with ourselves around that it wasn't the sensible choice to actually, yet we were just sitting with what was obvious, and it was obvious that this home came up, and this home actually, strangely enough, has actually been in the intuitive community before. Somebody else in our community had lived in this house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I found really fascinating. And we had somebody else that was visiting at the time who came to look at the property with us and said, I can remember having the most amazing parties in this house. This house has got a beautiful energy, and yeah, it's a really great place. And all of us, we all tuned in, just like, well, we have choice here. We can either buy it or not buy it. Like, the tension was quite strong.
Yeah.
But when we sat with what we would really love, not being fearful around, price fluctuations or anything like that, or around finances, it's going, well, this would be the ideal property to thrive in based on its history, but also based on what we would love.
Yeah. So you had quite a lot of tension there, because you had the tension over whether you get the long-term rental, the tension whether you'd have the short-term rental that you needed, and the tension of whether or not you will get this house or have to look elsewhere.
Yes, and the rental house that we took wasn't on the market. It was actually by word of mouth by somebody that was visiting, who mentioned that there was a short-term house sit. And it was just incredible that I was searching around on realestate.com trying to find a property to rent short-term, or looking everywhere to try and find where this property was, because it just came left of field. It just completely came out of just having a conversation with somebody. But it was in exactly the same road, exactly the same area of the road that I had seen in the vision.
And you were told about it, and that just makes it even more magical.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you have these conversations, and there is a certain kind of one thing after another, but as you talk about it, memories unfold and things come out all in different order, but it all contributes to, begin to remember the magic. It's funny how we forget magic like that. Yeah.
Yes, there's so many ways that we can start to rationalize
Yeah,
and try and make sense of things so that we can make a correct decision based on keeping ourselves safe.
yeah.
When it's just being aware of what's obvious, or what's obvious, and noticing the subtle hints, and keep tuning in and keep checking, is it still true? Is it in alignment? Is it what I'd love? And looking for those subtle hints. And that's how the magic happens.
Yeah.
Co-conspiring.
Yeah. So just to summarize, we've probably covered most of these before, but what lessons do you feel you've learned from this?
Never assume that an initial tune-in gives you everything that you need.
Very good. Yeah, you've got to keep tuning in, keep tuning in. Yeah.
Yeah, and also if you are working synergistically with somebody on a joint venture, whatever that may be, relationships, is to factor in that what they get is not the absolute truth as well, and that things can blend and shift, and there can be a multiple step in the process of actually getting to the end result.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So if people have like the stories you're telling them, they want to stay connected with you, how can they do that?
Oh, they can look me up on all the socials. It's tessmillersharp.com. It's my website. They can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page as well. I've got an Instagram. Tess Miller Sharp. That's it.
Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. So, yeah, if you'd like to know more about Tess and her work and you missed the link when Tess talked about it, or you'd like to learn more about me and my work and finding magic, because there's only so much we can cover in an episode, please head over to my website, vincentgmailing.com. You'll see a podcast button at the top, which will take you to the links where you can access the full list of podcast episodes. And for Tess's interview, that includes a link to all the resources she shared with me. And it's also got the full list of podcast episodes, the podcast platforms you can get them, and a link for you to join discussions of our episodes. And if you'd love to share your story of magic on the podcast, I'd love to hear. And there's a link for that too. Now, on the website, there's another button for you to get my upcoming book. And finally, there's a button for you to engage with me through coaching and trainings I run. So my website again, vincentgmailing.com. Thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks to the local birds, the golf course. The builders next door have been a bit quiet today because they usually contribute some sound effects, but it's really hot here and I think they've all gone home. And I'll catch you all in the next episode.